Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the mailbag. I am so excited to be sitting here today to answer all of your burning questions about Mike Tomlin stepping down, about who the possible replacement could be for Mike Tomlin, about the future of this football team. It's a really exciting time in Steelers football, and I could not be happier to be sitting here. Let's get right into it. Let's waste no time. First question comes in from Matthew Turak _ ideal head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and quarterback going into next season. Now, when you say ideal, what do I think is best case scenario? I don't know. I think I have to keep consistent. While I would like a young offensive coach, I think I have to go on the side of a little bit realistic here. I think Robert Saleh is very realistic. I think Mike McDaniel being offensive coordinator is pretty realistic. I know he's getting head coaching interviews. I don't know that the NFL views him as like a guy who would immediately get a head coaching job. I think he will down the line, but I don't know if it's going to happen this cycle. A guy that I really like for defensive coordinator is Raheem Morris. I mean, freshly got fired. We know he's a phenomenal defensive coordinator. He did so with Los Angeles just a couple of years ago. I think he would be a great defensive coordinator for whoever they bring in, especially if it's a somewhat experienced head coach like Robert Saleh. But then again, if it's someone like Robert Saleh being the head coach, then we know that he's going to be the guy running the defense, or he's going to have a big say in the defense, which I don't mind whatsoever. But Saleh and Raheem Morris running the defense, oh boy, that would be a lot of fun. And I guess ideal quarterback. I mean, do we like any of the quarterbacks that we're going to be picking in the late 20s? No, because there is one quarterback who probably deserves to go first round, and it's Mendoza. Dante Moore declared he didn't declare for the draft. He said he's going back to Oregon just earlier today. So it doesn't feel like, obviously he's not going to be in the draft, and the Steelers aren't going to get Fernando Mendoza. If we're talking super ideal, yeah, Fernando Mendoza, but who's the best free agent quarterback? Malik Willis. I'm going to whisper it because I don't think people will like it. I don't think they'll warm up to it. Malik Willis would be great. That would be great, especially if we have a competent offensive coordinator and an incredibly competent one like a Mike McDaniel. That would be ideal. That I think would give the Steelers the best chance to maybe be somewhat competitive next year. And when I say competitive, I mean the division, it could be very weak. The Browns are still going to stink. The Bengals, they're very up and down. Ravens are going to have a new head coach as well. It still feels like the AFC North is very much up for grabs. And Art Rooney said today in his press conference that they're going to waste no time. If they can compete, they're going to compete immediately. So that would be my ideal scenario, I guess, just in general, as we sit here right now. All right. Trenton _ Huffman 2005 says, with Tomlin stepping down, do you think Rodgers retires? I think yes. I think it is more than likely that Aaron Rodgers retires. I don't think there's many options for him, to be perfectly honest with you. The one thing he does have going for him is, like I said, quarterback options in general are incredibly thin for everybody in the NFL. Best free agent quarterback is Malik Willis. It's not a great free agent class. You can trade for like a Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson if you're into that. But I think generally, Art Rooney even said this in his press conference today. Aaron Rodgers came to play for Mike Tomlin. So that will obviously affect Aaron Rodgers' decision. He's 42, going to be 43 years old. It feels like this is probably the end of the line for him. Unless a team like the Vikings says, hey, you're going to be our starter. And that's a team that could compete with a decent quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers proved this year that he's a decent quarterback. He can get you to the playoffs. So unless an opportunity like that arises for him, I think he's going to retire, but I don't think it's going to be soon. I really don't think it's going to be soon. This one is a really good one. Blake _ Connolly says, now that he's gone, how well do you think this rebuild will go? Now, like I mentioned, Art Rooney said they're going to compete year one if the opportunity presents itself. But what I want people to understand, rebuilds are not linear whatsoever. Priority number one should be getting a quarterback. But like I said, I think that's going to be very, very difficult for the Steelers to get a true long-term answer at quarterback, especially this offseason. That's due to a mix of free agent class, the draft. I could say that a million times because I really do think that's what's going to happen. But where I think the Steelers need to start is they have a nice basis for the offensive line. They need to get some weapons. They need to start developing some young talent. I would like to see even guys like Caleb Johnson get a shot. I want to see the young guys developed more. I want to get maybe some more of these older players, maybe not move off every single guy that's over 30, but I would like to see some players maybe, moved off of and get some younger guys some shots. That's what I think you need to do in a rebuild is you need to assess every little bit of talent that you have and how they can be useful for you in the long term, because a rebuild could take a couple of years, guys. It really, really could. I want people to be ready for the fact that the Steelers could very well win 6 games next year. And that's okay. And that is absolutely okay as long as they're trying. And well, I'd say, as long as they're trying and having fun. But seriously, as long as they're like developing the talent and they're showing signs of, moving forward, and they at least have somewhat of a succession plan, or at least an idea of a succession plan at quarterback, you're never that far away in the NFL is the thing. That's what I don't think a lot of people understand too. A rebuild, all you need is a quarterback. Once you have the guy at quarterback, everything else falls into place. The Chicago Bears are a perfect example. They got the quarterback. They had a terrible coach, but they got, in one offseason, a great head coach. They rebuilt their entire offensive line. They got a couple of new weapons in the draft. They extended a couple of defensive players, signed some guys, got some late round guys. These young guys started to turn up for them. They have a phenomenal coach, and they have a number 1 overall pick quarterback. All of a sudden, they're in the divisional round. I know they're underdogs against the Rams, but this is still a very good football team that the Chicago Bears are. They should be the blueprint for what the Steelers want to do. They're the latest example of going, from basically a full rebuild to having everything fall into place for them and having an incredibly bright future. So I don't even know if the Steelers are going to go into a full rebuild, but rebuilds are not linear whatsoever. Rebuild is a very, very loose general term. I think there are lots of things that can go into. You could categorize as a rebuild. I would categorize the Steelers as in a rebuild right now, though. Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Juice13, do your predictions for next year's quarterback you've made on other pods. Kyler Murray, Malik Maniacs, a deep shot late in the draft. Changed now. I will say, I already said Malik Willis is probably like, it's best case scenario, especially if you have a competent offensive coordinator. But stay tuned later this week. Jack and I are going to have a video out where we rank all quarterback options for the Steelers next year from best to worst in our personal opinions. We'll give reasons. We'll debate about that. And you guys can let us know what you think of that. Someone recommended that in the comments, and I really like that idea. So we're going to do that. So if you have any video ideas, things you want us to talk about like this, please drop a comment and we will do them. But great question. That video will be out later in the week. This one comes in from thisismatthew.exe. At what low point do we start chanting, sell the team? Well, I mean, listen, fire Tomlin was the big chant this year. Like I said, we're going to learn a lot about how in charge Mike Tomlin was pretty quickly here. For them to start chanting, sell the team, like I said, I would categorize the Steelers as in a rebuild right now. They don't have the coach. They don't have the quarterback. They have none of it. They're far away right now from competing. As of, January 14th, when we sit right here, a lot could change. But I think we're a couple years away from maybe chanting, sell the team. I think that Art Rooney maybe gets a little bit of a leash in the fact that we're going to see who he hires. We're going to see what that coach is able to do. We're going to see Omar Khan, have a chance to draft a quarterback and that head coach develop said quarterback. So I think we're a ways away from that. I think that the Mike Tomlin thing really takes a lot of pressure off of Art Rooney. Am I crazy for that? I still don't think Art Rooney is looked very fondly upon by the Steelers fan base in general. But what I do think is that we're pretty far away from sell the team chance. This one comes in from Save Air. Thoughts on Mike McCarthy as a head coaching candidate? I mentioned this last night, but I'm good on that. I'm really good on that. It's not like I don't think Mike McCarthy can coach. It's not like I don't think Mike McCarthy's a good coach. I think he will probably get a job this cycle. I think he deserves that. I think a team like the Titans for him makes a lot of sense because they have a quarterback. And what does Mike McCarthy do? He runs a really good offense and he wins a lot of games. The Titans would kill for something like that because they already have the quarterback. The Steelers have none of that. The Steelers can afford to take a little bit of the long road here. And I know it's not much of a precedent because the Steelers have only had 3 coaches since 1969, but all 3 coaches, Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin, when they got hired, all of them had a couple of things in common. They were in their 30s. They were defensive-minded guys. I still think the Steelers go with the defensive-minded guy, and I think they go on the younger side of things. I don't think they're in a rush to necessarily get a Mike McCarthy and win now. If they had a young quarterback, that they wanted to try out and make sure that he was good and, they had a little bit more of a roster in place, then I could see Mike McCarthy. But I don't think Mike McCarthy fits the timeline of the Steelers. Mike McCarthy's older than Mike Tomlin. Keep that in mind. Not that Mike Tomlin or Mike McCarthy are old or anything. It just seems like a really weird fit. I don't think it's something that the Steelers go after. I don't hate Mike McCarthy as a coach, though. Like I said, I think he can provide a team like the Tennessee Titans. I think that's a perfect fit. I think that would be my choice if I was the Titans GM, owner, whatever. Shout out Luke Blaine. This one comes in from Andrew.Pelosi. Who do you not want to hire? I'm trying to go into this with a pretty open mind. I would be willing to understand just about anybody they hired. Things I wouldn't understand, I don't know. I think I'm pretty open, guys. I got to be honest with you. I would really like for them to get an offensive head coach. I would really, really like that. That would make me very happy. But I've kind of accepted the fact that they're probably going to go defensive side of the ball, and that's their precedent. That's what they want to do. That's their identity, culture. I get it. I really do. I'm not going to be very upset with any particular candidate unless it's like a Mike McCarthy or like an older head coach. But I really don't think it's going to be a retread. I really think that the Steelers are leaning towards a younger guy, an up and coming coordinator. And that's the route I think that they should take. Not that I'm going to be mad if they go out and they get an older guy that they believe in. I'm going to give everybody a fair chance, no matter who the Steelers hire. Let it be known that Joey is going to give them a fair shake until proven otherwise. And then he'll call for them to be out. But let's hope it doesn't get to that point. Whoever we hire is going to be phenomenal. Great question. JR_JR007 says, if you were the new head coach, what player on both sides of the ball would you build around? That's a really interesting question. On offense, I don't know that there's really anybody that you would quote unquote build around. But what I do think the Steelers have going for them is that they have a couple of good running backs in Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. I think Kenneth Gainwell will still get extended by the Steelers regardless of who's the head coach. But I also think that you have a young running back in Caleb Johnson. You haven't seen what he's capable of. So I guess I would kind of build around that running back room. And I think that's a good point because we saw this year the offensive line has been really gelling. They've been really good together. Zach Frazier had another phenomenal year. Mason McCormick feels like an answer at guard. Troy Fautanu looks really good. Roderick Jones looked good before he went down with that neck injury late in the season. And then Dylan Cook played phenomenal in his place over the last, couple of games. He had a pretty rough go against the Texans, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a Broderick Jones and Dylan Cook camp battle when we get to Latrobe in August. But it feels like the Steelers' offensive line has been really, really good. I would try to build around the run game and build around that offensive line. Even though I want the Steelers to be a pass-heavy team, I want them to be this savvy, Shanahan, McVay, all kinds of weird play designs. I want that to kind of be their identity. But I'm also willing to accept that I think the offense is best around the offensive line in the running back room right now. That could change if they go out and get another receiver, they get a quarterback. But I would build around those guys that are currently on the roster because that's the question. And defensively, it's got to be Alex Highsmith, right? TJ Watt, I think you're kind of stuck with him for what he is for the next couple of years, but you're going to continue to build around TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. If I'm the Steelers, I'm trying to extend Nick Herbig this offseason. Absolutely. I think that should be one of their top priorities. And I don't think he's going to be cheap. I think when Nick Herbig becomes a free agent next offseason, that he could get paid a lot of money elsewhere. But that would be one of my top priorities, is to lock up Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig for the foreseeable future, because those guys are the ones that are going to be around at the end of the road when hopefully you have a quarterback and a head coach in full swing. And TJ Watt's going to be there too. But because of his age, I think I'm more interested in building around Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig, building around the younger guys. Not to say TJ Watt's not going to be a part of this thing, and he could still very well be a productive player when the Steelers are competing again. That's feasible. But my answer would be Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig for that. Great question, though. This one comes in from Eric Gower. He says, what do you think we would get if we were to trade Tomlin? I think it would be very similar to the Sean Payton package. I think it would be at least a first-round pick. But what I do find interesting is that after the Art Rooney press conference today, the reporting seemed to be that Mike Tomlin has no plans to coach in the near future. I thought that was very interesting. It always seemed like it was going to be maybe Mike Tomlin takes a year off, then he, decides to come back to coaching, and the Steelers would still own his rights at that point, and they would still be able to get a package for him. They'd still be able to trade him. But as of right now, it seems like Mike Tomlin, he may be done with coaching for a while, for a couple of years. Now, I think a lot can change, and let me be on the record of saying I would not be shocked at all if Mike Tomlin is the head coach of one football team or another, for the 2027 season. But it seems like as of right now, Mike Tomlin is going to be stepping away from coaching for a good bit. This one, not really a question, but I think it's an interesting point. C17 Burner says, I genuinely don't know. This is unfamiliar territory, and I'm scared, guys. I'm scared. I don't want to lose games. What now? Listen, To be able to win, you have to lose. That's a great quote. That's a great quote. I think I said that first. I think I'm the first one to say that. To be able to win, sometimes to be able to win, you have to lose. Put that on a quote card, guys. Put that on a fucking quote card. That's a great saying. I just made that up myself. I'm looking at this with a very positive mindset, a growth mindset, if you will. I said at the top of the video, this is a very exciting time to be a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers because it is. Because it is. Every move that they make, you should look at it as this is a light at the end of the tunnel. This is really building towards something. Losing will probably happen, like I said. Wouldn't be shocked if the Steelers weren't very good next year. Wouldn't be upset at anybody either, as long as they're showing growth and they're building towards something. This is an exciting time. I'm very excited to see what the Steelers do and how they handle a quote-unquote rebuild, retooling, whatever the hell they want to call it. I'm calling it a rebuild. This one comes in from Brendan Sarber, and it says, what's one thing you'll miss the most from Tomlin's tenure? That is a really good question. That's really, really good. One of the things that I'll miss the most about Mike Tomlin's tenure is that I guess I kind of knew what to expect always, whether it was roster moves, whether it was, who they were going to draft, whether it was, personnel decisions in game, whether it was, they're going to try to run the ball and maybe they weren't always the best at it, but he was always going to try to establish that run. And the defense was, very good some games and it was going to win us some games, but it might underperform a lot. I guess I kind of got comfortable with knowing what was going to happen. And now we're in a place where, like the last commenter said, they're scared. They don't know what's going to happen. I think I am going to miss the consistency a little bit. As much as we all complained about the consistency and what had changed, this is why I'm saying that, it was bittersweet, obviously, to not have, Mike Tomlin as the head coach anymore, because while change was needed, we all knew what to expect with Mike Tomlin. And there is a lot of comfort in familiarity and knowing what to expect. So I think I'll just miss knowing what was going to happen with Mike Tomlin. Not that he was like a predictable person or anything like that, but it was a sense of comfort with him as the head coach of the Steelers. Does that make sense, guys? I hope it makes sense. Garrett_Bouchette. Sorry if I butchered that. Favorite Tomlinism. My goodness, that is a great one. I mean, favorite one this year was easily if my aunt had male parts, she would be my uncle. But favorite Tomlinism as a whole, I think the hardest I ever laughed at a Tomlinism was halftime of the wild card game 2021, I do believe, against the Kansas City Chiefs when TJ Watt returned the touchdown, the strip sack, when I thought we were winning for, all of 2 seconds. And then the Chiefs scored, I believe, 42 points unanswered the rest of that game. At halftime, they interviewed him and he was like clearly so cold and like just wanted to get in the locker room. And he's just saying, don't blink. Don't cut your eyelids off. This is not going to be for the faint of heart. That whole sequence was so funny to me and will continue to be so funny to me. I love that one. And Jack and I love to talk about this one. I quote this one all the time. There's a fine line between squashing grapes and drinking wine. That's just phenomenal. It's great. I will miss the Tomlinisms, but like I said in a video a couple of weeks ago, I think Mike Tomlin will be great on TV. I know there's some people like, Mark Caboli says Tomlin would suck on TV. I disagree. I think he would be pretty entertaining on TV. If he does take a TV job or he takes a year off, regardless, I would like to see Mike Tomlin on an NFL pregame. I would not be upset with that whatsoever. This one comes in from Dalton_Yrich, and he says, is starting Will Howard smart for a full-blown rebuild? To be perfectly honest with you, if it's a full-blown rebuild and the Steelers don't have any other options at quarterback, and maybe they bring someone in and they aren't very good, and, it's clear that they're not going to be the long-term answer, starting Will Howard as a complete and total rebuild would not be the worst thing to ever happen, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think Will Howard's going to be good. I don't think he's going to come in and save the franchise by any means. But if he had to start a couple of games for the Steelers next year, if the Steelers were a lost cause and they're just playing for a better draft pick at this point, starting Will Howard's not the end of the world for this team. Like I said, rebuilds aren't linear and a lot of shit can go down. So to answer your question, no, Will Howard's not the worst thing if he's a starter for the Steelers in a rebuild. This one comes in from Gooch.Josh181. What can we realistically get for Jonnu Smith, TJ Watt, DK Metcalf, etc.? Bad contract players. And we do have a chance. Do we have a chance of the front office moving on? We'll start off with Jonnu Smith. I don't know that any team would be willing to give anything for Jonnu Smith unless Arthur Smith takes a head coaching job. To be perfectly honest with you, Jonnu Smith is a black hole for the Steelers this season. You don't need me to say that. I say it every time, after every game pretty much. I don't think there's anybody that would give anything for Jonnu Smith. TJ Watt and DK Metcalf are tough because they're on huge deals and they're among the highest paid at their positions in the National Football League. TJ Watt, I don't think the Steelers would move him, even if they're in a full-on rebuild. I feel like he's a player that is going to age out on this roster, and there's nothing wrong with that. DK Metcalf, I don't know, man. He's a tough one to trade. Nobody's going to want to take on that contract. I think if the Steelers are fully committed to sucking for a couple of years, maybe they do it down the road. But as far as like this season, TJ Watt's going to be on the team next year. DK Metcalf's obviously going to be on the team next year. I don't think we could get much of anything for those guys. Anything of substance that's going to help the Steelers win this year, which maybe shouldn't be the goal. Maybe they should move them, but I just don't see that happening. I don't think the Steelers would get nearly the package that, people would be satisfied with. I'll put it like that. You're not going to get nearly a first-round pick for any of those guys under any circumstance. Evan Wenkes _ thoughts on Grant Udinski. Haven't heard maybe people give that name for the Steelers in terms of the coaching carousel. My personal favorite option. I would love any offensive-minded head coach. Grant Udinski, for those of you that don't know, the Jaguars offensive coordinator, and we saw Trevor Lawrence really break out this year. I mean, he was phenomenal, played his best football he has in his career, and Grant Udinski is a very young and up-and-coming offensive mind, very early 30s, and he kind of fits the mold of the Steelers as far as, wanting the younger guys. That's what they've done whenever they've hired head coaches in the past, although not much of a sample size over the last 50 years or so. But at the end of the day, I do think the Steelers lean defensive side of the ball. I really think that's what happens. But if they were to hire a Grant Udinski, I would be jumping for joy. I would love the idea of having an offensive-minded head coach who prioritizes getting a quarterback, throwing the football, and I would have a lot of fun with an offensive head coach. It would be incredibly refreshing to see a Grant Udinski offense as compared to an Arthur Smith offense. And I think Arthur Smith did a decent job overall this year, all things considered. I don't think he was great, but I think he did a decent enough job. But it would be night and day between the type of offense we would see Udinski run and Arthur Smith run. So I would be a big fan of that. I think that's a great shout. This one comes in, the great Dill Bob. Do you feel confident enough in the front office to make the next head coach hiring? Always, what are your raw thoughts about all of this? Do I trust the front office of the Pittsburgh Steelers? No, not really, to be perfectly honest with you. Do I trust them to make the right choice? Yes, because interestingly enough, throughout their history, hiring the correct head coach has been kind of their superpower. That's been something that they've always done right. And Art Rooney and Omar Khan are going to head this search. They're going to be, the ones that make the final decision and have the final say. Overall, whether or not you trust Omar Khan, whether or not you trust Art Rooney is one thing. I do trust them to pick the guy that they want. I do trust them to pick someone who's a leader of men, someone who's young, up and coming. I think all of those qualities are going to be things that they look for. And I guess I do trust them a little bit to pick the next head coach. Like I said, going into it with an open mind, not going to absolutely hate anybody that they hire. But I do think there are guys that, are certainly much stronger candidates than other ones. No Limit Nolan says, not a question, but we need a mock draft ASAP. Coming later this week. Stay tuned is all I'll say on that one. This one comes in from Ty _ by the way. What are your thoughts on Flores defensive coordinator and McDaniel at offensive coordinator? By the way, I love the pod. Appreciate the kind words and appreciate your question. I would love that. I would love Brian Flores to come back to the Pittsburgh Steelers as defensive coordinator. But knowing now, what we know at the time of this recording, Brian Flores is, he's got a head coach interview with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I guess I'll answer this. How would I feel about Brian Flores as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers? He's a little bit on the older side. He's mid-40s as compared to, some other coaches the Steelers have hired throughout their history. But I think he fits the defensive mindset. Whenever he was with the Steelers for 1 year, they loved him. The whole building loved him. They were very sad to see him go. Keep in mind, the Steelers chose Teryl Austin over Brian Flores for defensive coordinator. Yes, that is something that happened. So for him to come back as head coach, I think it would be a really good story. Things didn't end well in Miami for Brian Flores, and that's still why he doesn't have a head coaching job to this day. But he's a hell of a defensive play caller, and that is something that I think Omar Khan and Art Rooney are going to value very, very highly. especially given that he's already worked with them for a year and they all thought very highly of him. I think he's a very strong candidate, and he's one that may be on the Steelers short list, to be perfectly honest with you. This one comes in from Muffy.Nick. Will Arthur Smith and or Teryl Austin also be fired / step down after today? I don't think Arthur Smith will be straight up fired. I guess Teryl Austin's contract has expired. You're not going to see anything on him because the Steelers are just going to let that happen. They're going to let him walk away. He's not going to be with the team next year, if I had to guess. Arthur Smith, it's going to depend on the head coach. If it's an offensive-minded guy, I could see Arthur Smith, see in the door. But if it is someone like Brian Flores or, any other defensive head coach like an Anthony Weaver who they requested to interview, I could see Arthur Smith being back as the Steelers offensive coordinator. I think the head coach is going to have full reign of whatever staff they want to pick. They're not going to have anybody interfering with them. I think the Steelers have always let their coaches pick their staff, and they should. It's not going to be like an Omar Khan and Art Rooney pick who the assistant coaches are. But I do think that's not a bad shout. Arthur Smith could very well be back as the offensive coordinator. Do I want him back? No, probably not with a new head coach. Do I think he will be back in my heart of hearts? No, I don't think so. I think Arthur Smith, the fact that he's getting head coaching jobs, he might get one, guys. He might legitimately be a head coach next year, which is crazy to think about. And our last question of the mailbag comes in from Easton Gully. Favorite and least favorite Tomlin moment. We'll start off with least favorite. Least favorite was easily the wild card loss to the Cleveland Browns back in 2020. That was a game that I think radicalized a lot of people in the sense of, wow, maybe this guy, it's been a while, Mike. You haven't won a playoff game in quite some time. This was the turning of the tide. This was the Cleveland Browns, who the Steelers had owned for their entire time, basically existence under Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger lost a home playoff game to the Cleveland Browns. That will forever be one of my least favorite Steelers memories, one of my least favorite Tomlin moments in general, because overall it was just not a well-coached game. And that was also the 11-0 season where the Steelers completely collapsed. That was not a good coaching job, that last half of the season. It was just terrible. So that is obviously my least favorite. And favorite moment, I think, how could I say anything other than, all the memories that he was able to give us? The Super Bowl championship, obviously. I would think about, the 2017 Christmas Day game, the Immaculate Extension. That was a well-coached game all around by Mike Tomlin. Again, an all-time Tomlin moment for me, one that I think a lot of people are always going to look fondly on, is the AFC North Championship just a couple of weeks ago. The Steelers somehow won off of a missed field goal, and Mike Tomlin goes up to the camera and starts, pounding his chest. Like, yeah, I did that. I made Tyler Luke miss that field goal. I loved that. I loved the celebration. And knowing now what happened, what the fallout was of that game with Harbaugh and Tomlin both being out of jobs, Tomlin, of course, stepping away, Harbaugh getting straight up fired, I think that makes that one of my most favorite Tomlin moments because he got the last laugh in the Steelers-Ravens rivalry that he had with John Harbaugh because that was their rivalry. That shaped a lot of people's childhoods and lives, and it was the best rivalry in football for a long, long time, and I hope it will continue to be that way. Great questions, guys. Phenomenal questions as always. Keep them coming. We'll do more of this as always. I appreciate every single one of you for watching and listening. Hit a like, hit that subscribe button, guys. Getting very close to 1K. It's crazy. I love doing this. I'll see you guys very soon.